At 10:15 this morning, on the 8th of September, two gunmen opened fire at a crowded bus stop at Ramot Junction in Jerusalem. 6 Israelis were killed and more than 20 wounded before an off-duty soldier and an armed civilian shot the attackers dead. Within hours, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at the scene flanked by security chiefs, studied a bus windscreen peppered with bullet holes, and promised that Israel would pursue those responsible and take even stronger steps. The facts are stark. The police say the attackers came from the West Bank. The dead include a Spanish-Israeli citizen. The wounded include a pregnant woman. International leaders have condemned the murders. Mahmoud Abbad condemned any targeting of civilians. And those details matter because they remind us that even in a brutal war, most people are not combatants. They also matter because within hours of his visit, Netanyahu's rhetoric leapt from the crime scene in Jerusalem to civilians in Gaza City. He warned residents to leave now, telegraphing a larger ground maneuver after days of high-rise demolitions. The army has been urging departures from Gaza City since the weekend. The Prime Minister framed this as war on several fronts. The Gaza City wasn't supposed to be attacked until November. Two things are happening at once, and we should keep them separate in our minds. First, an attack that is murder under any plausible legal or moral reading. Second, a political choice about the scale and theatre of reprisal. Netanyahu's decision to use the Jerusalem killings to justify wider threats against Gaza and to preview a new ground operation is not an automatic or necessity or necessary response. It's a choice. He made that choice on camera. Consider the language. From the Air Force Command Center, Netanyahu celebrated the fall of scores of towers in Gaza as a prelude to a larger push and told residents to get out. That is collective messaging aimed at a city where displacement, hunger, and exposure have already shredded civilian life. International humanitarian law requires distinction, proportionality, and precautions. Announcing that urban towers are coming down and that a column guard is assembling is a political signal, not a legal argument. The laws of war do not turn on televised vows. Now, to the West Bank, as Netanyahu spoke, the IDF said it was encircling villages from which the attackers allegedly originated. This playbook is familiar. Roadblocks, raids, arrests, sometimes punitive demolitions. It answers a public need to be seen acting swiftly, yet it drifts towards collective punishment, which is unlawful. It also risks igniting a second theatre of sustained confrontation while Gaza remains in flames. Diplomatically, the attack produced the usual chorus of condemnation from Paris, Brussels, Washington, and Abu Dhabi, alongside a call from the EU that the episode shows the urgent need for a ceasefire, and that will poison the well in Jerusalem, where officials increasingly interpret ceasefire talk as indulgence of Hamas. Hamas, for its part, praised the shootings as a natural response without claiming them. This symmetry of denunciation and praise feeds the cycle that leaders claim to lament. What is Netanyahu doing politically? Well, three moves. First, he's reasserting control of the narrative. The live clip, the shattered glass, the convoy, the brisk promise of harsher action recenters him as wartime steward after months of criticism over strategy, hostage diplomacy, and corruption scandals touching his circle. The optics serve him. Two, it fuses fronts. By tying a West Bank attack to escalations in Gaza City, he collapses distinct security files into one theatre, justifying more force everywhere. That is effective politics in Israel's current mood, but strategically risky. It hands militants a veto. They can trigger Gaza punishment by striking in Jerusalem. Three, it hardens the deterrence line. Ministers swiftly called for deportations of attackers' families, for more weapons in civilian hands. That posture polls well with parts of the base, yet it corrodes long-term security by normalizing collective penalties and armed vigilantism. Deterrence that alienates the center ground ultimately weakens the state's strategic depth. The moral question is as old as statecraft. May a government turn the mourning of innocence into license for wider coercion against a trapped population? The answer in law is no, and in prudence it's unwise. It breeds more men with guns at bus stops. The answer in politics today is that it will continue because it's emotionally legible and electorally useful. So, what would a sane response look like? Targeting policing, not theatrical flattening, hunt facilitators and logistics chains tied to the Jerusalem cell, do it with warrants, arrests and evidence, not blanket closures that strangle livelihoods and fuel the next shooter. That was the lesson after previous bus stop killings in Jerusalem, when precise disruption worked better than mass lockdowns. Telling civilians to leave now without safe routes, food and shelter is theatrical in the worst sense. If the government is determined to push into Gaza City, it must enable monitored corridors and pause windows. That is hard, but it is the price of any claim to moral clarity. The army has already warned residents to depart. A warning creates obligations. There must be real humanitarian corridors. Back to the table on the US framework. The US says a new proposal is on the table and that Israel has signaled acceptance. If that is real, Jerusalem should put detail in public, define sequencing, and show how hostage releases, withdrawals, and monitoring would work. Do not allow a single atrocity to bury the best bad option. And calls to arm civilians en masse and deport families may win a headline. They also create legal exposure and strategic blowback. Leadership is the art of telling your allies no when they demand sugar and you need medicine. A word about the victims. The dead this morning were commuters and students and parents doing ordinary things. That is why the video is so haunting. You watch an entire crowd run in an instant. It is right to grieve and to punish the guilty. It is wrong to turn that grief like a cancer into policy that treats a whole city as suspect. Finally, the wider picture. 2 years into a war, the vocabulary of warning has become ritual. Leave now, move south, evacuate, flatten, return, repeat. Ritual is not strategy. Strategy answers the questions. What end state is attainable? Who governs Gaza? What restrains settlers and militias in the West Bank? How do you stop a teenager with a rifle from believing he is avenging the last demolition? Until there are credible answers to these questions, every shattered bus window will become another speech, another vow, another tower falling, another family with nowhere left to go. The duty of government is to protect its citizens and to uphold law at the same time. Israel has every right to hunt the men who planned this murder. It has no right to turn that hunt into a rolling threat against 1 million citizens. Grief cannot be a doctrine. It has to be a constraint.